Imagine pushing your way through the dense, overgrown forests of South India a little over a century ago. You move past these thick vines, and out of nowhere you're standing right in front of a broken Buddhist stupa. Just a massive, domed shrine, totally buried under decades of earth and vegetation. Ancient inscriptions just sitting there in absolute silence, waiting to tell stories of long-lost empires. I mean, it literally sounds like a scene straight out of an adventure movie, right? But this was the actual reality of South India's ancient heritage before someone stepped in to map and preserve it. So in this explainer, we're uncovering the story of the man who walked into those forests and totally changed how we view history.
Which brings us to a pretty major question. Who actually saved all these forgotten monuments? When we talk about Indian archaeology, you usually hear the heavy hitters, names like Alexander Cunningham or John Marshall. But today, we're shining a spotlight on a truly unsung hero. His name? Albert Henry Longhurst. He was this incredibly patient archaeologist who pretty much dedicated his entire life to systematically uncovering and preserving India's forgotten past, pulling massive, totally neglected sites right out of obscurity.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our map for today. We're starting with the forgotten archaeologist and how he was a different kind of explorer. From there, we'll follow his quests through uncovering Pallava architecture, the grandeur of Hampi, and the Buddhist treasures of Nagarjunakonda. Finally, we'll wrap up by looking at his complicated, lasting legacy.
Section 1. The Forgotten Archaeologist. While the history books love to highlight those big names connected to the Archaeological Survey of India, the ASI, Longhurst really carved out a highly overlooked role for himself. He joined the rapidly expanding ASI in the early 20th century, eventually working his way up to superintendent of the Southern Circle, based out of the Madras Presidency. And guys, this was an absolutely massive geographical area, completely filled with unstudied temples, forts, and ruins.
Section 2. A different kind of explorer. Now, you have to remember, this was an era where a lot of travelers heading out to ancient ruins were really just looking to extract wealth. But Longhurst, he was totally different. He wasn't out there hunting for gold or artifacts to just pack up and carry away. His sole mission was historical understanding and the strict physical preservation of these monuments.
It's a really stark contrast here. Your traditional treasure hunters of the era were focused purely on extraction. They'd often leave this terrible trail of destruction behind them, literally tearing down ancient walls just to find a quick prize. But Longhurst completely opposed those destructive habits. He brought a calm, deliberate, and highly systematic approach to the table. His focus was 100% on detailed documentation and protecting these fragile structures from the elements.
And his methodology was incredibly exact. Actually, pause for a second and remember, he did all of this without any modern technology. No drones, no digital cameras, no satellite mapping, nothing. Step 1 was just grueling physical travel across wild, unforgiving regions. Step 2, manually measuring monuments and drawing these intricate architectural plans by hand. Step 3 involved painstaking photography, dragging around heavy early 20th century camera gear. And finally, Step 4, publishing highly detailed scholarly reports. He quite literally drafted the foundational blueprints for future archaeologists.
Let's see how this all builds, because his massive geographical and historical impact spanned 3 very distinct eras. We've got the Pallava monuments in the 1910s and 20s, the sprawling Vijayanagara ruins in the early 20th century, and later on, the Nagarjunakonda Buddhist sites in the 1920s and 30s. So let's zoom in on that first major quest.
Section 3. Uncovering Pallava architecture. During the 1910s and 20s, Longhurst traveled deep into Tamil Nadu, hitting up sites like Mahabalipuram and Kanchipuram. He was there to study the monuments of the Pallava dynasty, a seriously powerful empire that ruled from the 4th to the 9th centuries. They were the absolute pioneers of the Dravidian temple style. But crazy enough, when Longhurst first arrived, their monuments were severely underappreciated on the global stage.
He ended up documenting just an incredible variety of structures. We're talking intricate cave temples, rathas, which by the way are essentially these massive ancient stone chariots, mandapas or pillared halls, the iconic shore temple, and these huge sculptural panels. Longhurst was totally fascinated by how these structures developed. He meticulously analyzed the entire evolution of Pallava architecture, tracing how it transformed from simple rock-cut forms carved straight out of a hillside all the way into incredibly complex structural stone temples.
He compiled all of this revolutionary research into a publication simply titled Pallava Architecture, and it quickly became the definitive scholarly work on the subject. By breaking down the architectural styles, the religious symbolism, and the construction methods, Longhurst basically helped establish Mahabalipuram as the globally recognized UNESCO World Heritage Site that millions of tourists visit today. Literally, without his precise documentation, it might never have gained that global academic spotlight.
Moving on to Section 4, the grandeur of Hampi. Shifting gears over to Karnataka in the early 20th century, Longhurst set out to map the ruins of the magnificent Vijayanagara Empire, which flourished between the 14th and 16th centuries. And you have to understand, when he started his work here, Hampi was largely this chaotic, overgrown, partially neglected site. It was in total ruin.
But Longhurst? He saw the grand ancient city hiding beneath all that overgrowth. He dedicated himself to carefully studying and mapping out massive temple complexes, endless pillared halls, ancient market streets, grand royal structures, and heavy fortifications. He meticulously recorded the Virupaksha Temple, the Vitala Temple, and the magnificent stone chariot. He was essentially rescuing the grandeur of the Vijayanagara Empire from historical amnesia.
And this brilliantly illustrates his lasting impact, all captured perfectly in his book, Hampi Ruins Described and Illustrated. Now, this was not just some casual travelogue. It was a deeply precise scientific record. His descriptions were so accurate that they allowed generations of later archaeologists to conduct systematic conservation work. Because he recorded it so well, the historical memory of Hampi was fully preserved, allowing it to become one of India's most celebrated modern heritage sites.
Section 5. Buddhist Treasures of Nagarjunakonda. Moving into present-day Andhra Pradesh in the 1920s and 30s, we arrive at what is perhaps his most historically significant excavation. This massive Buddhist center was deeply associated with the ancient Ikshvaku dynasty.
What Longhurst and his team pulled from the earth here completely shifted our historical understanding. I mean, they unearthed sprawling Buddhist stupas, huge monasteries, crucial inscriptions written in the ancient Brahmi script, remnants of ancient universities, and deeply sacred religious relics. These discoveries were absolutely earth-shattering for historians. Why? Because they revealed this hidden, immense, flourishing of Buddhism in South India that was largely unknown before these excavations even began. He published these incredible findings in his landmark work, The Buddhist Antiquities of Nagarjunakonda. This publication is so vital because it demonstrated the vast international connections and cultural exchange of ancient Indian Buddhism. The artifacts Longhurst cataloged showed direct links between ancient India and other Asian Buddhist regions. He was effectively rewriting the scholarly understanding of South India's ancient global network, a real game-changer.
Section 6. A complicated, lasting legacy. After his incredible decades of service in India, Longhurst transitioned over to Ceylon, what we now know as Sri Lanka. Operating as their archaeological commissioner, he applied his genius to Sri Lanka's greatest treasures, like the breathtaking rock fortress of Signeria and the ancient ruins of Polonnaruwa. But you know, whenever we study history, we have to view the people who wrote it through an objective lens. Which requires us to look at the colonial context here. Albert Henry Longhurst operated heavily within the British colonial administrative system. And, as modern historians rightly point out, colonial archaeology sometimes interpreted Indian history through uniquely European perspectives. However, even existing within that colonial framework, the actual physical preservation, the meticulous measurements, and the structural documentation Longhurst carried out remain objectively and undeniably valuable. At the end of the day, he saved ancient stone that was simply crumbling away.
So the crucial point is this. The sheer breadth of his work was staggering. Whether he was documenting the Pallava Empire at Mahabalipuram, the Vijayanagara Empire at Hampi, or the Ikshvaku dynasty at Nagarjunakonda, Longhurst provided the definitive text. Modern Indian archaeology still fundamentally relies on these exact publications and measurements today. He was the vital bridge that transformed neglected ruins into the globally recognized heritage sites we celebrate right now.
History becomes alive only when we continue exploring it. Just think about the sheer patience and dedication it took for one man to walk into a dense, forgotten jungle, armed with nothing but a tape measure, a notebook, and an unwavering desire to project the past. Albert Henry Longhurst was truly a silent guardian of South India's ancient heritage. So knowing what incredible treasures can be hidden just beneath the earth, what forgotten parts of human history do you want to explore next? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep your curiosity alive.